Hey Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast. I'm your host, W.J. Sheehan. Hello, everybody, and thanks once again for joining my brother and I for what is going to be a terrific podcast and an all-around good time. My name is W.J. Sheehan, and I am the author of a series of books entitled Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters, all of which are available at Amazon, volumes 1 through 8 in ebook and paperback. And you could also acquire volumes 1 through 6 at Audible, iTunes, and Amazon if you go for the audio book gig, if you catch my drift. And now, without any further ado, may I bring in and introduce you to my co-host and brother, KJ Sheehan. Kev, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you, Bill?
Marvelous, marvelous, darling. I'm just gearing myself up. You know, by the time this podcast airs, it'll be over. But we're supposed to have that Geminids meteor shower.
Oh.
And supposedly in my area, 150 an hour will be seen in the sky. So, you know.
Very cool.
I'm hoping we're going to have some clear sailing and I'll be able to stand outside and just watch this display in the heavens of fireworks, you know?
Oh, I definitely want to check that out. And,
yeah.
You know, two other things related to that. The other night we were out walking out of the front of the house in Raleigh where we have street lights there. So it's like, you know, it's not that great for seeing the stars and stuff. And our neighbors from across the street were out in front of the house. And I was like, hey, what are you guys up to? And they said, look up. And it was the ISS, the International Space Station, was coming over. And I've seen it before, but it was like so close and so bright. And it was only about 6 o'clock at night. So I think that made a difference, you know, like where the sun was located below the horizon, and I guess how close the ISS was to Earth, because it was bright as like an airliner with its lights on passing over, but it was the ISS. It was so cool.
So what you were seeing was really this bright, luminescent ball going over.
Yeah, like a big, bright planet, you know, like Venus coming over and moving, you know, what appeared to be like picture 5 miles an hour, you know, as our speed on the ground across the sky.
Right.
Super cool.
That is amazing, that stuff. And, you know, people would say, so what's the big deal, you know? But to me, it is a big deal.
It's cool. And by the way, so we have coming up, I don't have the facts in front of me for the podcast here, but I think it's December 21st, right? The 3 planets are going to align like they haven't since like 900 AD or something like that, right? Like I think it's Jupiter, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. I think are going to be so close together, closer than they've been together, you know, since 900 AD.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
And on December 21st. So I know you have the different calendars and stuff like that, but it's almost like I remember going to the planetary shows way back when I was a kid, Bill, you know, at the Vanderbilt Planetarium, and they would have the Christmas show that would have the different theories of what the 3 kings or magi might have seen in the sky, you know, for the birth of Christ. And one of the theories was, you know, these once, not even in a lifetime, once in thousands of years, where the planets come together in one place, and form the brightest thing in the sky. So it's kind of cool that I think it's December 21st.
Which is the winter solstice.
Yes.
And the other thing is, it really doesn't matter what they saw. The thing was they had the motivation to go and follow it.
Exactly. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the really interesting part. Bright light, planet, whatever they saw, they knew it was a sign and they had to go follow that, So that's.
By the way, spoiler alert, I think the episode after this is going to be our beloved Christmas episode.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So stay tuned for that. I think we'll bring in a pile of reindeer poop or something for that, right,
Jeff? Hopefully not on the bottom of my shoe.
On a roll. Bill's Cafe, how can I help you?
No, thank you. No, thank you. I ate before I came here.
Yeah, it smells really bad in here. All right, so what do we got now? Cryptids in the news and other oddities segment today.
So this week, Bill, we're in our second season. We have almost 80 episodes out there, and we're going to discuss for the first time, but not the last time, on our podcast, the most famous video film of the hairy man ever. Mm-hmm. And what's your guess at what that is, Bill?
Well, let's see. I guess it would be the Patterson Gimlin film.
Otherwise known as PGF. The Patterson Gimlin film. So we haven't done it since we started this podcast, and it's always on my list, of course, and it's been covered extensively. But I think it'll be kind of cool for you and I to talk about it. Me being the relative newcomer to cryptids and other oddities, and here talking about the most famous footage, and really the footage that has created the so-called squatching pose, right, of the Bigfoot with, left arm up to the sky and the right arm out behind its back, in
the
stride.
Swinging arm, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
So, of course, this was filmed back in Northern California in 1967. It's believed to have been filmed in late October in 1967 along this Bluff Creek in Northern California, an area where, I guess historically there's been a lot of flooding along this tributary of the Klamath River. In a big logging area. And of course, in that footage, you have Roger Patterson, who passed away back in 1972, believe it or not, and Bob Gimlin, who, of course, is still alive, today. Yeah. And they're out on horseback, a couple of guys that are, apparently like rodeo guys, and riding along there on a multi-day ride. And they see this Bigfoot, that became known as Patty, because as you look more closely at the film and with the enhancements of the film, you can see that it clearly has breasts. Right. So it's a female Bigfoot.
Right. No, it's definitely an interesting clip. And, I heard Bob Gimlin doing an interview. There's been a lot of people who have poked at this film.
Oh, yeah.
And we all know, or we've heard the guy in the suit. Somebody said at one time, I heard some guy say he made the suit for Patterson. I don't know what all the involvement is with all of these people. But what I do know is what I saw with my clinical eye as a therapist, that was a living, viable creature that had skin attached to muscle and was moving anatomically correct in every way, shape, or form, every movement the body made, whether it was the arm swing, the legs flexing or extending. I could see muscles moving in coordination with each movement that was made, and there was no way a costume could be made to do that on a person, especially that large.
Yeah, and moving at that speed through this creek, this that's covered in like giant limbs and giant logs, and looking back over its shoulder and moving with good speed, a very quick pace. That would be tough to do with a costume on without, tripping over something.
Yeah,
and in fact, by the way, like Roger Patterson, when he's running, when you look at the film, when he's running to get the camera and to get up closer to the beast, he trips and falls on the riverbank, which is kind of interesting,
the excitement, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's all kinds of stuff around. It's not like he's in a parking lot.
Right. So the point you're getting at is the agility of the Bigfoot to walk turning its head like it wasn't even concerned about tripping.
Exactly. Just no problem at all. So it's pretty...
Bob Gimlin had said in one of his interviews that when they saw the creature, Patterson jumped down and fell.
Right.
And then he got up with the camera and tried to steady his arms on a stump or something so he could get a good, clear shot of it. And you see that going on in the film, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, he gets off the horse, he takes the camera out of the saddlebag, and then he starts hustling along, and he trips and falls on the riverbank. Or like the sand from where the water was prior, the previous high water mark. And then he gets to like a stump or something and steadies the camera on it.
Yeah. And you could just imagine the adrenaline rush that was already taking place.
My God, yeah.
Now, Bob said that after the initial shot, he wanted to pursue it.
Yeah.
He couldn't even believe what he had just seen. And
I probably saw the same interview you saw, but I'm going to post the interview because it's on YouTube, and it's from our favorite survivor man, Les Stroud. Yeah, and it's the outtakes, I guess, or the full interview with Bob Gimlin that he did. And it's probably, I want to say it's about 40 minutes long on YouTube. And it's just him continuously talking about that day. So it's probably the same one you saw because he talks all about that stuff, and it's kind of unedited. And of course, they edited that to make the much shorter Les Stroud Survivor Man Finding Bigfoot that featured Bob Gimlin.
Yeah.
But he has the whole thing. I'll post it on BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com on our website with this episode. So,
yeah, and Bob said, first of all, Bob was a rough and tumble character. I remember him talking about, how many bones he broke in his body and whatnot, bucking broncs, and he was like an Evel Knievel on a horse,
Exactly.
And he's out there, and he said that he couldn't believe what he was looking at and wanted to see it again just to confirm in his mind, like to kind of sort out, like, am I nuts or am I seeing this thing?
Did I really just see this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's the coolest thing. Like, we can all relate to that. Like, what the heck? Like, I remember, this is going to sound dumb, but it's a similar situation in modern day life, right? Years back when I moved to Raleigh, I hit a deer, right, with my car. But it was in, like, the city of Raleigh. Like, it was a place where you wouldn't think you'd hit a deer. And, like, it was just caught me completely by surprise. I was doing about 30 miles an hour on a main road, like a 4-lane, not a highway, but a 4-lane city road.
Right.
And I was like, what the heck just happened? We're like, boom. And you saw these hooves come across the windshield. And, like, I pulled over and, like, couldn't open up my driver's door because it hit on, like, the front left quarter of the car. Had to get out the passenger side. And, like, I went over and looked on the side of the road in the bushes to make sure that it was really a deer. Because I didn't know what happened. And here's the same thing. Like, Gimlin is riding along on horseback, outdoorsman, spending a multi-day hike, camping out, riding along this riverbank with Roger Patterson, his longtime friend. And he sees this Bigfoot. And he sees Patterson film it, Patterson comes back after chasing it up the river a little bit and says, I'm out of film. And then Bob Gimlin's like, he wants to go and look more at it because he's like, did I really just see what I saw? Kind of like me hitting the deer. Like, was that really a deer? Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I understand that. You are just stunned. You're in a mental stupor, having seen. I relate back, Kev, to the Whitehall cop.
Oh, yeah. I love the quote from him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at something that I'm told doesn't exist.
Yeah, I'm staring into the eyes of something that I've been told my whole life did not exist.
It is freaking remarkable.
It's the greatest quote of all time.
Now, some people, I looked at the film, I didn't see anything. There were some people that said they saw other creatures in the bushes, and they felt that the female was trying to lead them away, potentially from some juveniles or something. Do you see anything in that picture?
I didn't see that. But in this interview with Bob Gimlin, he talks about the fact when Patterson ran up further, like I guess Bob was there with his horse, Roger's horse, and the pack horse that like he was trailing behind him.
Right.
On a rope, of course. And when Roger ran up there, he said that he saw 3 sets of footprints.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
so where were the other 2, one might ask?
Exactly. And I know from seeing, the grizzlies and the brown bear in the wild, they definitely take care of the young. Like they will, I told you the story in Alaska 2 summers ago where the mama brown bear or grizzly, I mean, they call them brown bears up there in Alaska, but same animal, would send the cubs up a tree while there were other brown bears in the area. Like when she'd go fishing in the stream and we'd watch them, she would send the cubs up a tree. And the guide we were with called it brown bear daycare.
Yeah. We had that discussion when I was telling you about that guy that got mauled twice.
Yeah.
And walked away. You had told me the mother went away to run the cub up a tree and came back for the guy the second time.
No doubt about it. They first take care of the young. And, in this case, that could also be true. So, and that was interesting, too. In that interview, again, I'll post it with Bob Gimlin and Les Stroud. He talks about the fact, like, they went up there because Roger Patterson had heard about sightings of this Bigfoot in an area where a logging crew had come in to put in a tank, like I guess, a portable fuel tank for the logging equipment. And when they went out there to fuel up some of the equipment, they saw these tracks of Bigfoot. Right. And they told Patterson about it, and he had always had Bob Gimlin saying like he had some of these castings of Bigfoot tracks, and Bob says like whenever they would go out camping and stuff, Roger would have these little like recordings, like the old-fashioned tape recorder, and they would play these accounts of different people. Kind of the early accounts of predating Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, of course. But they'd sit around the campfire, and Roger would listen to these and play them for Bob. So that was kind of interesting, too. So what brought them on this multi-day journey was to go up into this area to see if they could see the Bigfoot. I thought that was cool. Know what?
It is cool. And the fact that he had come prepared, there's nothing wrong with that in my mind. He was hopeful and trying to be prepared, like a hunter going with the right gun, right?
Absolutely.
I'm going hunting today. I'm not guaranteed I'm going to get something, but I'm hoping this day is the day I get my 10-point buck.
Yeah, I did buy ammo and clean my gun,
in preparation for my belief or my hope.
100%.
Right, and so the fact that he happened to be prepared that day and the stars aligned for him and he was there and it happened, I mean, he must have been like as jubilant as a little kid on their birthday when that happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty cool. And like you said, Bill, there's been people that have tried to debunk this over time. You know, it was around the same era, I guess, of the Planet of the Apes movies. So you're right. Sometimes it's tied to the fact that, well, maybe this suit was like something made by the folks in Hollywood that made the Planet of the Apes costume. But then, you know, like I looked at some of the stuff online, some of the research, the videos, the analysis, and it looks nothing like it. Like there's some stuff, I'll try to put the links up on our website, where they compare it side by side, the imagery, with like the Planet of the Apes stuff. Doesn't look anything like it. And then the mass of it, again, like some of the, you know, doubters say it's like a water suit that's worn inside of it to give the extra mass, but that wouldn't look like muscles moving, you know, like you were saying. And you're a student of anatomy and kinesiology and physiology. You know what you see. You know whether it's a water balloon underneath the skin. You know.
Right. Well, that creature had the mass of like Haystacks Calhoun with the muscles of Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime.
Yes.
I mean,
give me your clothes.
Give me your clothes. And the guy laughed at him. Remember that? He had the food cube. Give me your clothes. And but the musculature in that thing to fill that suit, that you could see the extension of the triceps and the quadriceps muscles banging out when the leg was in flexion coming up towards the body. I mean, it was just incredible. You would have had to have freaking arms that were filling that thing that were the size of my thighs to make that happen, you know. And ain't nobody around then or now that can fill that suit the way that thing did.
Plus,
you know?
it's kind of like really like the idea of making it a female, too. I think, like, if you were going to try to hoax it, you wouldn't go through all the trouble of trying to make it a female.
No, and let's face it, that Bigfoot is not the typical V-shaped monster that we hear about.
No, it's not.
She's got, like, big hips.
Yes.
Kind of wide in the bottom. Kind of like a giant baby Huey from the old cartoons. You remember him?
Yeah.
He was like that big guy that was the biggest duck or whatever he was, and a little narrow on the top, a little wide on the bottom, the long arms, that conical head coming up. And when she turned just to look, I mean, these creatures are all business, man. You know, they're not... They're not like
there's another gentleman too. I'll try to post a link to his analysis. So one gentleman went up there to the valley there, and filmed his friend, who was 6'5", kind of a skinny guy, walking along, trying to use the same exact point of view and what his best guess would be at the same lens and camera that Roger Patterson used. But they don't really know which camera or lens he used, right? Because he's gone, long gone. And I don't know if you saw this, Bill, but they have a image of the guy walking along, like still frame, across the whole path where Patty walked along, what we call Patty now, from the Patterson Gimlin film. And they line up, like it lines up, all the trees and stuff line up perfectly. They're still there. And this creature walks along in the same path. And it's bigger than this guy that's 6'5".
Yeah, no, it's taller, and the guy also looks like a stick.
He looks like a stick. You're exactly right.
Next to the mass of that creature.
Yeah, he looks like he weighs 100 pounds, and he's 6'5". So it also, that kind of flies in the face of, you know, one of the, you know, that one guy, I forget his name, that, you know, took the lie detector years ago and said that he wore the suit. And he was like this little guy, as I remember, you know, like, no, it wasn't Schwarzenegger wearing the suit.
No, even Schwarzenegger couldn't have filled that suit.
Right.
Because
But what are you saying?
I'm saying you're a fraud, Arnold.
I'm massive.
You know, really, to fill that suit, you'd really have to have literally, I can't even put a number on it, 500, 600, 800 pounds of mass.
Oh, yeah.
And tall, just to fill that bag, that suit. You know, this was no stick figure that put on a costume and was walking across there. This was a big thing, big creature.
I'm with you.
Absolutely incredible. You know, really, I mean, I'm sure Bob would have loved to investigate the other tracks, but who knows what happened after that. I mean, maybe they were just like shook up and whacked out after the sighting. Like, you know, what just happened? You can only imagine what happened, Kev.
Oh, you can't blame them. I'd be shaken up.
But kudos to Bob, you know, he wanted to follow it. You know, I got to get another look at it, you know.
No, and honestly, Bill, we would do the same thing. You know what I mean? You'd be nervous about it, but you'd be like, wait a minute. You know, like it just happened a couple of minutes ago. You're like, let me go look. And I remember them in the interview. He said it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think, and it was late October. So he said it got dark around 5 or 5:30. So they were also worried about getting back to their camp. Their base camp, which is quite a distance away.
Yeah, they had to move or get stuck in the woods in the dark.
Yeah, not good.
You know, and they didn't have headlamps and infrared goggles to guide them through the woods.
No.
You know, a horse walking back in the dark in the woods could easily break an ankle or something.
Yeah.
And then you'd really have a problem on your hands, you know?
Big problem, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible, man.
Cool. So that's our first look at this, Bill. You know, like we'll come back and I'm going to do some more research on it. We'll talk more about it. But, you know, it's like 80 episodes in, 79 episodes in. We got to talk about the Patterson Gimlin film.
Yeah, and that is kind of where the bar was set for a sighting of a Sasquatch. Really the first one that was clipped on film. And, you know, what an amazing thing. And to this day, people are still talking about it and trying to break the film down, and people dispute it, and other people like myself say, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. This is a living, breathing being. And it's just incredible, you know.
And I remember it like yesterday, Bill. I was sitting in that little movie theater down in Lake Ronkonkoma. I think it was like the Jerry Lewis Cinema or something like that.
Yep, that's what it was.
Yeah, and I was probably 8 years old or something like that when they did that documentary on Bigfoot. And this was, you know, it was like a 1 hour long documentary in the movie theater. And we went to see it. And it was like all about this film and what they saw and, you know, interviews with them both, etc. It was super cool. I remember that like yesterday.
Well, it's amazing, man.
Yeah.
The Jerry Lewis Cinema. Now, some people today wouldn't even know who Jerry Lewis was, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes, you know. Some people you say, hey, have you ever seen the Patterson Gimlin film? They're like, what's that, you know?
Yeah. Well, and by the way, the Jerry Lewis Cinema, last time I was there, up there, and looked for it, it was an off-track betting place.
Yeah, OTB.
For horse racing.
OTB, you know. It's funny, you know, I don't know. You know, things change, right? Things change.
It's all right. It's all right.
Jerry Lewis Cinema, by the way, never really packed it in.
No, and it was cheap, right? Like it was like the $1 movie.
Yeah, and people preferred other theaters over that one, you know?
Yeah.
But very interesting. And like you say, Kev, we'll be digging back into this more, and as well as everything else Bigfoot encrypted as we move along. But it's worth talking about. You know, I've always said there's always people coming in who don't even know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
So don't get bored or think badly, but, you know, people are coming in that don't even know what a Bigfoot is. And they're tuning into this podcast and listening for the first time and need to be brought up to speed, so to speak, as to where a lot of this stuff began, at least in our minds, right? We know now the historicity of Bigfoot goes back hundreds of years, if not thousands of years.
Yeah.
As we dig into our cryptids and other oddities and some of these accounts that I read, we have stuff going back hundreds of years that we've been talking about.
Yeah, by the way, I neglected to mention this, and I have to mention it, and I'll put it on our website, BigfootTerraInTheWoods.com, with this episode. But, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, right, one of the scientific minds studying Bigfoot, Sasquatch, he has a cool graphic that I'll put up there that compares the surface anatomy between the costumes of the movie Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which was from 1970, and the footage from the Patterson Gimlin film in 1967. Okay. So the Patterson Gimlin film predates the first Planet of the Apes movie by 3 years, and there is no comparison. Like, he puts them side by side.
Yeah.
And I'll put that up there. It's pretty cool. When you look at it, you're like, oh, yeah. Like, one looks like, like a Star Wars character with a brown cloak on versus the anatomy you talked about that you see in the Patterson Gimlin film.
Yeah, I mean, the apes in Planet of the Apes, they were neatly done for the movie.
The faces. The
face makeup. All of that. Of course, it's sci-fi like, right? So we appreciated what it was. But to compare the two is just like nonsense.
Agreed.
It's not.
But I'll put it up there, and our listeners can judge for themselves.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, let's move on into something else that's really cool. This account was brought to my attention by Wayne Kincaid, a resident of Alberta, Canada. Here is what Wayne had to say about what he ran across while out moose hunting with his partner. It was in 2007 when my partner and I went up into the Wells Gray Provincial Park on a moose hunt. We took my ram north from Clearwater Station on a secondary road, which eventually turns into an unpaved road. It was a rough and bumpy go for almost 10 miles. Eventually, we reached the southern tip of Clearwater Lake, where we would make camp and begin our hunt. The plan was to work the timber going northward around Clearwater, Azure, and Hobson Lakes, until we found what we came for, which was a big bull moose. Our base camp was to be the truck. We were backpacking a small mountain tent and light supplies, the reason being that if we bagged a moose, it would have to be butchered and carried back out. This scenario is rough enough if you're close to your camp, but should we get our mark up by Hobson Lake, it would require several trips with a lot of heavy meat on our backs. There is some extremely challenging terrain in here, even for a seasoned hiker. But when you add 175 pounds of meat to the pack, it can get really interesting in a hurry. On our first day out, we had patrolled the eastern edges of Clearwater, with little results to show for our efforts. We had called in one bull that was relatively immature and had seen a couple of cows as well. That afternoon, we hiked back to the truck and spent the night under the stars, pondering our plans for the following day's hunt. At sunup, we were heading due northeast for the eastern end of Azure, which is a spot we had tagged a huge bull several years ago. Now, Azure Lake had proved to be more promising than what we had seen near Clearwater, but still we were not committed to the fact that there was nothing better to be found elsewhere. Once again, we withdrew from the timber, leaving ourselves enough time for the 5 or 6 mile trek back. The next day, we were committing ourselves to some serious mileage in hopes of attaining our goal. To reach the lower end of Hobson would be 6 miles one way and over 12 to the northern end, keeping in mind that anything shot up there would have to be butchered and carried out the same way we had come in. We crossed through the shallows in an area where the 3 lakes meet and started to work the lower, narrower portion of Hobson Lake. The day turned bleak, and it had started to rain, first very lightly and then more heavily. We were nearing midday when our call sounded like it was attracting something more along the lines of what we came for. As we watched and called, a huge old bull came plowing through the brush about 100 yards out from our position, and he was committed. We waited and continued to call. When he was about 40 yards out, my partner Brendan pulled the trigger. The bull dropped where he stood. We hiked up and huddled around the beast and began the task of butchering the meat. By the time we had finished, we would have barely enough time to make it back to the truck, let alone making 2 trips with the spoils. Now, in these woods, there are a fair amount of grizzlies, so our plan was to bag what we couldn't carry and hoist it into the trees, coming back for it the next day. This is an extremely dangerous scenario to enter into, and I don't recommend it to anyone. The butchering site alone would be enough to attract a bear from miles away, and we wouldn't be coming back until the following day. This is the day we refer to as entering the danger zone, and for good reason. Many a hunter has been mauled or killed coming across a bear in such a situation as this. We lifted the remaining meat off the ground some 15 feet, hanging it from a stout bough, and commenced with our hike back to camp. Between the two of us, we were carrying well over 300 pounds of meat and had a solid 7 miles ahead of us. If you think that this is easy, well, think again. By the time we made it back to camp, my body was burning from head to toe. We collapsed by the fire for a well-needed bite to eat and some rest, knowing that we had to return early tomorrow for the remaining spoils. Throughout the night and continuing into the morning, it was raining hard, and despite the weather, we had begun our hike back into the danger zone. By this time, there would easily or could easily be 1 or more bears in the area, having sniffed out our previous day's activity. The forest was extremely tight and dense where we hoisted the meat. So as we neared the area, our hiking speed had come to a crawl. There is no moving quickly as you close in on the zone. Every step, every move is meticulously plotted out and taken, looking in every direction and at every turn for a bear that may be awaiting us. The rain was unrelenting as we approached the site. It was nerve-wracking in that the noise from the rain alone would drown out any sounds that an approaching carnivore might be making, and we were on edge. As we came into the site, both of the sacks were gone from the tree. One of the ropes was still tied to the tree's trunk, and the remainder was lying on the ground. The other rope was still hanging over the bough, but the rope's end was snapped off, with the sack being taken. As we were taking all of this in, we were still very much on guard for anything else that may be approaching or in the vicinity. At this point, the rain was coming down in buckets, and the ground was saturated around the site. I was standing looking at the rope hanging from the bough, when my eyes were suddenly drawn downward. Below me and all around me in the wet peat were enormous footprints throughout the entire area. I put my boot alongside of one of them, and they were double the size of my own, which made them about 20 inches. The two of us stood there completely aghast at the spectacle of what we were seeing. We both knew that these were the prints of Sasquatch, a Sasquatch that had just taken our remaining moose meat. I don't think that either of us in the moment could fully accept what it was that we were looking at. We had heard the stories and seen the film clips and the like, but now this beast had become part of our own reality. We were looking down on the footprints of something that is said not to exist, and now we had the proof. You will have to trust me, and yet, having said that, it is more than likely that you won't, when I say that there was positively nothing around in these parts that could have left such tracks other than a Sasquatch. As we gathered our composure, we could now see where the beast had entered the site and where it had exited. There were hundreds of deeply compressed prints in the peat, coming and going from the same point in the woods, indicating exactly where it had traveled. Having nothing left to do but hike back, we left the site and returned back to the truck. One of the most amazing aspects of this was the thought of a single creature snapping a half-inch thick piece of climbing rope from a bag dangling at 12 feet off the ground, and then making its way off single-handedly, carrying some 350 pounds of meat and perhaps more. Whether or not people choose to believe in their existence is of no consequence to me from this point forward. We now know for ourselves, beyond the shadow of a doubt, they do exist and are roaming in the forests of British Columbia, at the very least. Just to reach that height and to have the strength to snap climbing rope should put fear in anyone, in my opinion. What do you think of that, Kev?
Holy moly. I can't imagine, Bill, hiking 7 miles back into the forest in the pouring rain and to get the rest of the meat. I mean, honestly, I might be satisfied with the first round of meat.
I got it, but the true hunter likes to do things. They like to do things by the book,
No doubt about it. It's what you do. I mean, I get that. But what a terrifying encounter, right? You get back there. Okay, first off, you're like, what he called it, the danger zone, right, where you're storing the meat.
Yeah.
So you're heading into trouble. Then it's pouring rain, so you can't hear anything, probably can't see anything too well either. And then the 2 sacks of meat hanging from the tree are gone. Like, holy cow.
And, when we think about strength, he is spot on. When he says, I mean, you and I, Kev, you're a sailor, right? You know what really nice ropes are.
Oh, yeah.
And a half-inch climbing rope snapped?
No.
I can't. I don't even think in a tug of war, a dozen men on either side could snap a half-inch.
No, and climbing rope is designed, right? Like in case you're climbing and then you slip, that like it could take the snap, like the sudden stop and acceleration of all your weight. So you got to be super strong.
Absolutely. And on top of it, originally he said the bow was about 15 feet, but I understood why he said 12 afterwards, because the sack hung below that. Mm-hmm. And think of something reaching over their head.
Yeah.
At that height and pulling down or grabbing. Yeah. And just being able to break it, I mean, it's crazy.
No, I agree.
And he's totally correct. Not only that it walked off with the 2 sacks by itself. Or maybe there was 2, but he didn't mention 2. He just mentioned a lot of tracks,
Yeah. 20-inch long footprints, too. Like, holy cow.
Mean, that's a big beast, man.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't shock me. Certainly I would call that place the danger zone, because you're coming back in a day later, and we know that big carnivorous animals can definitely have zoned in on his zone, smelling the blood and the butchering from the day before. I don't even know how you enter back in there with a straight face and a clear mind that you're going to be okay.
That's what I meant at the beginning. It's kind of like, you're in for the adventure. You definitely better be carrying more gun than you think you're going to need. I hope you didn't cut down on the firepower because you knew you had to cut weight to carry the meat back.
Yeah. I'll tell you, man. Again, I don't know if I should give kudos to guys like this or just say these people are out of their minds.
Well, they're brave, Bill. You know, you're going in Alberta, excuse me, into the rough country of the forest, and you're going bull moose hunting. You're a brave sort. You know what I mean? It's and you're prepared. You know, you wouldn't do this, without working up to it and, doing a lot of hiking and being very comfortable in the outdoors. Because, let's face it, even if you twist your ankle or get bitten by a snake or something, you're screwed,
Yeah. And you have to be extremely fit.
Absolutely.
Not only just to do it solo, but then you add the backpack.
Right.
And, younger people, of course, have are more fit than older. You know what I mean? This is a young man's game,
Yeah, and hiking around, in grizzly country in that pouring rain too. That's really, really dangerous because, you can't hear the bears, but the bears can't hear you either. So you're much more likely to kind of come around a corner and surprise a grizzly or worst case, surprise a grizzly mother and her cubs,
Yeah, I can't even imagine, the melee instantaneously,
Bad news, yeah.
The adrenaline rush and everything that would happen psychologically in a heartbeat.
No doubt about it.
It's just incredible. But so there you have it. I mean, did he see a Bigfoot? No. But you tell me, after hearing that account, what happened.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious what happened.
Yeah. And I think he said hundreds of footprints too, right? So it wasn't like he saw one footprint.
Yeah, no, apparently very soggy. He said peat, which is like that, we all know what peat is.
Yeah.
Spongy kind of sphagnum moss, whatever may have been over there. And a monstrous beast stepping on that would certainly leave huge indentations in it, and back and forth and walking around the bags, ripping them down, putting them on the ground, whatever this beast was doing.
Yeah.
And then leaving the site, look what I found. Honey, I got dinner.
Good thing the market was open.
Yeah, 400 pounds of free moose. That's incredible. So, my brother, what do we have today in our bag of tricks for listener mail?
Yeah, we got some good mail from our listeners. A couple of them come in without saying what their location is, so, that's okay. But this one comes in from Matt, and I'm not sure where he's from, but he says, "Hi, I really enjoyed Bigfoot Terror in the Woods podcast. He says, I live in Portland, Oregon. Don't mind me, Matt. I can't read. And this area, and Bigfoot is very popular in this area. Absolutely. This is me talking now. Oregon, a hotbed.
Yep.
I know these creatures exist. I believe they live underground in caves. I hope in our lifetime they're proven to be real. Besides the Skookum cast, what other Bigfoot body impressions have you all heard of? I tell everyone to listen to your podcast. I found your podcast and Sasquatch Chronicles are the best. I also enjoy your humor. Have a great day, Matt." So thanks for writing in, Matt. Bill, what do you think of the Skookum cast?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. And first of all, mentioning Sasquatch, a big shout out to Wes Germer out there. If you're listening, Wes, give me a shout when you can. The Skookum cast was located and brought to bear, and it represents what people believe is a impression of a Sasquatch kind of lying down on its side. There's as I recall, there's like a rump impression, the upper leg and what might have been like the knee and the leg and the side of the body, almost like something was lying on its side, maybe like you or I would, if we were resting on the grass or something like that. And it's interesting, of course, believers look at it and say, oh, yeah, we have this impression of the Bigfoot laying down. Look, it's here. And then, of course, the naysayers would say, yeah, it was a moose laying down,
Right.
But
right.
It is compelling when you see it to say to yourself, wow, yeah. I mean, they would lay down, and you just found a spot where they probably did. Kev, do you recall in, I don't know if you saw this one, in Les Straub's Survivor Man Bigfoot, he came across this matted down grass on the side of a lake. And next to it was a giant, what appeared to be a very big salmon or some other big fish, maybe even
or a seal, like vertebrae? Was that?
Yeah,
it?
you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. A seal. I was just thinking the vertebrae were too big to be a fish.
Yeah.
It was perfectly stripped.
Yep.
Just a skeleton like you'd see in a museum. It wasn't broken, damaged. It was like it was picked away.
Yep.
And lying right next to that hugely matted down area in the grass.
Yeah, I did see that one, obviously, and much bigger than even a moose would make, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the moose isn't stripping clean the carcass of a seal.
No, and that was wild looking. It looked like I wouldn't have guessed that it was a seal. Of course, he's the outdoorsman, complete expert, but it looked like a big, long, like giant snake or something like that, right? The way the vertebrae was.
Yeah, and he commented on how strange a find that whole thing was.
Exactly. I think he said he never found anything like that before. So
Right. And the Skookum cast is a lot like that. They took an impression like they do with the plaster with the footprints, and it's compelling to look at it and say, see, the oddity is, if it was a human being, we'd all be looking at it, oh, yeah, there's the side of his butt, there's his knee, there's his leg, oh, yeah, here's where his elbow was laying. But it's only because somebody tries to associate the very same postural impression to being that of a Bigfoot that the problem begins. Then all of a sudden it's got to be, it's got to be a moose, it's got to be a bear. It's a weird dichotomy that develops when we start talking about what is human, what is something else, and what is a Bigfoot.
Yeah, but Bill, you're always going to have the scientific mind come in and try to rationalize what else it could be, right? I mean, that's just part of the process.
Right. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I get it. I get it. And then the scientists will argue amongst themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, that's just part of the process. So.
Yeah. So, but by the way, Matt, I haven't heard of anything like that. Other than that, and plenty of foot impressions, plenty of trees being stripped of bark, snap trees, all of the rest that we've all heard about, but nothing quite like that to date.
Cool
Interesting
stuff. Yeah, cool stuff, and thanks for writing in, Matt. All right, our next letter comes in from Mark from Eastern Washington. And he says, hey guys, how you doing? Hope you are well. I'm Mark, the driver from Eastern Washington. I shared a story with y'all earlier. I was listening last week and you mentioned that there should be a Bigfoot mascot somewhere. Well, there is here in Spokane, Washington. Spokane Community College are known as the Bigfoot.
Ah.
Yeah, they sell in their school store everything with a Bigfoot on it. They have a big squatch and looks real as you enter the main entrance to the building. And at the basketball games, they have a squatch mascot. That is awesome.
Kev, I'm surprised you never came across that living up in those parts.
I don't know if they had it when I lived back there, but he finishes up by saying, well, keep up the great work. Love the accounts and all the info. Stay safe and remember, carry all the vaccine you think you're going to need. Well, thank you, Mark. Yeah, Bill, I don't recall that they had that when I lived out there for about 4 years in Spokane. So maybe it's a new thing. I'll have to check that out. I mean, the Phoenix Suns, when I lived in Phoenix, they had the gorilla as the mascot, but it wasn't the Sasquatch,
I just made a note as you were reading that mail. I'm going to try to remember to see if I can get on their website if they have it and see what kind of... I'd like to get a shirt or something from the Spokane Community College and wear it or what. Something,
Yeah, I'm making a note to do the same.
And by the way, guys, good reference. Always carry as much vaccine as you think you're going to need or more than you think. I had my first shot. My wife had it. Folks, if you're listening, and you are, when you have opportunity, do not be afraid. Do not hesitate. Get this double dose. There's nothing to it. No reaction at all. I didn't feel like I do when I get the flu vaccine. There's nothing to it. So do yourself and everybody else a favor, and when you're able to, get the COVID vaccine.
Awesome, Bill.
Yep. So there you have it.
Yeah, and Bill and his wife, if some of you are new to the podcast, they work in a hospital, so that's why he was able to get close to the front of the line. I haven't gotten my shot yet. They haven't offered it to me, as I'm not in healthcare.
Yeah, it'll become... I'm sure, Kev, this is going to be a giant snowball tumbling downhill.
Oh, I'm with you.
And it's going to happen and start to happen quickly,
Yeah, no doubt about it. Cool, man. Well, our last letter comes in from BJ in South Carolina. And he writes, a big South Carolina hello to Kevin and the other guy. He says, I think his name is Bub,
Bubba.
William? Or is it Bill?
It's Bubba.
He says, it doesn't matter what the other guy's name is. He only wrote the book series that birthed one of the best Bigfoot podcasts on air. Let's face it, Kevin makes the show, Bill, or whatever his name is. And Bill, or whatever his name is the best second man in podcasting. He writes, I'm literally laughing out loud thinking about Bill's future reaction to this message.
Well, you're hearing it, and I'm coming for you.
Great. And he says, all kidding aside, I have the utmost respect for both of you guys, and I share in many of your interests. I enjoy hiking, camping, fishing, and just spending time outdoors. I'm also a writer. No books as of yet, but working on that. Though I have never seen the hairy man, I do believe that my wife and I heard one vocalizing in close proximity to our property. Prior to this, I've been an avid listener to all things Bigfoot, including Sasquatch Chronicles, The Confessionals, Strange Familiars, and Into the Fray, but had never had an experience that I could chalk up to the hairy man. We were preparing to take our family camping in the spring of 2017, and it was between 10 and 11 at night. We were loading up the back of my truck with all of our gear, so we would be ready to leave early the next morning. As we were moving gear from our storage building into the truck, we began to hear a faint sound that we couldn't identify. It seemed to be way off in the distance, but it was loud enough for us to hear it above the racket we were making and all of our talking. We both paused to listen and heard a distinct howling yell that was unmistakable for anything other than a Bigfoot.
Wow.
Yeah. At that moment, we both looked at each other but didn't say a word, continuing to finish the task at hand. As we continued to pack our things, the howling continued and became louder and louder. We finished up and listened to the sound for a little while longer until it stopped, just as suddenly as it had begun. All of this occurred over a 20 to 30 minute time frame, with it vocalizing upwards up to 5 times before fading out completely. After we entered the house, we continued to look at one another but still said nothing until I broke the silence and asked her what she thought it was we were hearing. She looked at me and said that she didn't know, but if she had to put a name to it, it sounded like a Bigfoot to her. We still talk about it to this day and wonder what it was we were hearing. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, I mean, once again, here we have how many people do you think have had a similar experience that nobody's ever going to hear about?
Oh, no doubt about it. Especially like that kind of howling, hearing that howling and not knowing what it was. I mean, we just had New Year's Eve here not too long ago, and I was out at the coast, Bill, with the family, and of course we have a lot of coyotes out here, as I've mentioned. And we went outside, like a lot of people do, right after midnight, to look and see if we heard fireworks or people banging pots and pans or whatever they do. And it was kind of a little surreal, with 2021 coming in, all of us happy to see 2020 go out the door. It was very subdued. And in fact, just a few minutes after midnight, all of a sudden the woods came alive with all of the howling of the coyotes. And wow, it was a little creepy, But again, you're not going to mistake coyotes for anything else really, other than coyotes, and you're certainly not going to mistake them for Bigfoot. It's a unique sound, powerful howl, but unique and weird.
Kev, is this something new for that area with the coyotes? Because I've only heard it from you first, that recording you sent to me, and now today. Have you heard these regularly since you've been over there?
Oh, yeah. So, I've been here for about 3 years, I guess now, and they always have the coyotes here because they warn people, don't leave your pets out at night and stuff like that because it's a relatively small island. And a lot of coyotes when you hear them howling. So we know they go after the deer because we have deer on the island as well, but they definitely go after the pets.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But getting back to this couple, did they say where they were located, Kev? I forgot.
Where were they?
Well,
they were in South Carolina, but I'm not sure where they were going.
Okay, so, this idea of, you see, what gets me is when people hear this, the howling, it's totally distinguishable being what it is versus anything else. Like even a person whose mind is not wrapped around Bigfoot but has heard maybe a little bit about it, when they hear this, the thought immediately enters their mind, Bigfoot. They're not thinking dog, they're not thinking wolf, they're not thinking moose, mountain lion. When they hear that howl, that deep, resonating, roaring howl going on, the mind just says it's a Bigfoot. And that's what's incredible to me. People recognize what they're hearing and what they're not hearing, even if it's something they're very, very unfamiliar with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree, Bill. And I describe it, based on the recordings I've heard. I haven't heard a Bigfoot howl yet. But based on the recordings, I put that freight train moniker on it. It's like it's got that power of a freight train whistle,
Yeah.
Freight train horn.
Kev, one of the greatest ones was that one you put up, that recording of the man with his kids.
Yes.
Standing in front of that wood line, like in that field.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Right. It had that freight train powerful resonance to it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that. If I was there in the same spot, I would just be like, what the?
What the heck is that?
Hits you in the face. Like, wow, what the heck is that?
No doubt
and it
about
goes on. It goes on and on,
Yeah, it's not a one-time blast, so to speak.
Wow.
All right. Well, that's it this week, Bill. First off, I want to thank all of our listeners and wish them a Happy New Year. They'll be listening to this in 2021. And hope that for all of you that 2021 is better than 2020. Thank you for your support. This is the first recording of Season 3 for us. So just like I always ask you, please continue to give us these 5-star reviews Our listenership has grown dramatically for the first 2 seasons, and one of the single contributors to that popularity is those 5-star reviews. So if you haven't given one, or if you haven't given one lately, please leave us another 5-star review on your favorite podcast player.
Yeah, folks, I second everything my brother just said. And by the way, if you really want to ensure that you're going to make it through this new year, always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. Sleep tight.